And pull out, just put that. It's plastic or glass? So that makes it plastic. You don't mind?
I think I missed last week. Are we on 25 or 26?
I wasn't here last week either.
Okay, well, there you go. We'll figure it out together.
After I feel broke.
All right, let's start the stream.
Let's do my wrist that way.
He's already started. Very good. Let's make sure John is sitting. Well, I got both of those done just in case. But I know we're either on 25 or 6,
Right.
I think. That one. And that one.
How's Miss Florence tonight?
Pretty good.
Good.
I just wonder if
Her arm doing, or wrist, or
it still hurts.
no.
Hurts. Just aches up to the top of the shoulder. Oh, and the end of the shoulder too.
We're going.
I saw like your arm, you said it aches.
Yeah, it aches. It hurts down here, but it aches all the way up through the whole arm.
You still broke?
Yes.
Well, it's supposed to heal faster than
They say a sprain takes a long time.
that. How's my step?
I don't think she'll be here tonight. We said she was home last night, Chris spent the night, Monday night, took her home yesterday, but she called me, it was around 5 or something. I was early in it. I can't come tonight. I said, oh, no, tell me what's wrong. She said, no, I'm just having problems.
How do we get rid of that cat?
Huh?
How do we get rid of that cat?
Well, there's a cat on there.
Huh?
She got 3 of them.
Don't get rid of him.
Why?
She got to blame on something.
Oh. She can wait till them get the little babies.
Oh, cats are adorable.
You got to blame it on something. Might as well blame it on the cats.
Yeah. Yeah, but she couldn't wait till home with them.
What do you mean she's just hurting?
She's got, for some reason or other, she's having diarrhea like crazy now. So, we don't know. I told her, I said, that keeps up all day long. I said, you better let him know about that because that's the opposite, we don't,
You get really dehydrated fast.
See, at our house, she never was diarrhea, but she never was, it never, which I was glad it wasn't ever hardening because that was my fear, trying to get constipated and ripping it in or something.
Yeah.
Because it's just been stitched, but she never did harden up, but I was having her about Miralax every morning. I said, I want you to drink this Miralax and coffee every day, and so she was keeping it, just
Smoothly, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
But she said it was absolutely diarrhea all day today, and she says, I don't know, I don't think it's supposed to be like this. And I said, well, no, I mean, you want it normal.
Won't
I
get the
mean,
Miramax anymore though.
yeah, I didn't even think to ask, after we hung up, Bill says, did you ask her if she was taking that Miralax? I said, no, I didn't think about it. I said, I think she's learning about it.
I would think so, yeah.
No, I hate to hear that.
So, I don't know, she's probably gonna have, when you have part of your colon cut out, you're probably gonna have a tween.
Yeah.
It's probably
It's gonna be
never
hard to get it all.
normal.
Know what to stay away from, what.
Yeah, it's probably gonna block your constipation in the lungs and then constipation, I don't know. Hopefully she'll get smoothed out eventually, but I'm still more concerned about the blood clot than I am. They said that.
You forgot to shave that ugly thing in the shave.
Well, she's at home, so how would you know? How would she know?
Well, when I get home, she'll
But they
She'll
Well, I'll
notice.
just turn out the lights.
Yeah.
Saturday? And her blood clot hadn't changed at all.
I will say John does look better with the beard though.
He does?
I think so. Because I saw some pictures not that long ago when he didn't have it.
I would never say anything, but he reminds me of a chipmunk with that beard.
Really?
Yeah.
She'll take that.
It makes his cheeks pop out like he got.
That's the cutest friend I've ever got.
Only that by accident.
Because I couldn't
Huh?
my cat once, so that
by accident.
Oh, I said, I would never say that.
Not to his face.
That's just fit, you know?
Are we on 25 or 26 now?
Unless it's just.
We're on 24.
24, okay.
Yeah,
Then I'm still good.
we,
I didn't know how far y'all got when I
we're
was
just like a
going.
little bit finishing 24.
Okay.
That's the time, she liked it. Some people appreciate my works and some people. I thought that was, let me bring that out loud when I was encouraging.
It was perfect.
Yeah, yeah. Oh. I thought it was perfect.
So we still have a little bit of 26.
Yeah, it's still on 24.
Yeah.
You see Tommy tell me sick, you know, that because he didn't think it was good.
I think it's funny.
He was, but he's out pushing the dust here. Yeah, I opened it up and I go, oh, okay, and then you open it up and then.
That's the bad though, I feel like we'll put that on.
I thought it was funny. Took you right up your arm for a little bit anyway.
Maybe it's my
I
hands.
mean, I laughed out loud when I was reading it. I go, oh, it was
I can't
just.
see in any spot looks like it's
Oh.
bigger than it is,
No, there's nothing unusual down
where the dog keeps biting.
here.
See there?
Oh,
What? She's not really biting. She's,
Oh,
her
really?
teeth are just a
Right.
sharp baby, you know, she's trying to be a lover.
To show that, they have a big long tube,
Was she
and
just,
that's how you
she
drop
doesn't
the
mean it.
seeds into it.
Really?
You sure have. Everyone, the
Well,
home, not for anything.
How did you even get anything?
It's interesting, but, it's awesome. You put this hole there, and you put, you know, that hole there, you did, and then you drop the, so you don't have to bend way over.
Boy,
It's
like
time
a,
what they're charging for. So
Well,
it's,
it'll
be a cute. It's in the response.
no, it's not, I think, but
Well,
it's
you could
pretty.
probably just go, use some PVC line, and put about this
A little bit of
thing,
tan on her
and up
face.
this round. And
And
then
her
over there,
ears
you have the,
hurt.
that's something else with that or what, but basically, you.
All
All right, the clock on the wall says it's time to begin.
Stands up here to come to She looks funny.
I'm sure John will be in here in a little bit, because I know he's here. I don't know about Isaac. Pat may not be here, because Jack got home today. Talked to Jack yesterday,
Yeah, this
and he was doing really well. They already have him up walking and everything. He said the doctor told him that he's never seen a knee as bad as this one was, so it was a good thing he had it replaced. And he said he's already feeling better, so that's a good thing. If you're not on email, you missed the email message I sent out about Cody. Cody's in the hospital. It's I have to pull out my notes here. It's called Oakwood Springs Psychiatric Hospital, and that's just west of Memorial, or just west of Western. I'm sorry, just east of Western on Memorial, south side of Memorial, and visitation is only at 7 p.m., so you can't just go in there any time of the day.
He can have visitors.
Do what?
He can have visitors where he's at there.
Yes,
Okay.
because he called me and told me visitation is at 7 p.m. We're going to finish up chapter 24 tonight.
How are you?
Do you know if he has to report to them who will visit? Some places they'll only...
I don't know. He called me this afternoon, and he asked me if I could come up and see him tonight.
Okay.
And I said, no, tonight's Bible class. So he asked me if I would come see him tomorrow night, and asked me if I would bring a Bible along as well. He just said that he was a very sick person, and that he's in room 505. So he may not know all the rules himself yet, so I'll find out more tomorrow night.
And
I'll
they
let
don't have
everybody-
that rule, but it's something they do.
And I suspect they do. That, I mean, this is a new psychiatric hospital. I watched them building it and everything, so I don't know anything about the rules of it or anything, but I'll find out tomorrow. But I'm guessing there are rules when he said that visitation is at 7 p.m. So I imagine there's a limit there, maybe a 1 hour time frame or something. Yeah.
There.
So, but anyway, I will take a Bible to him tomorrow night and see what's going on with him and see if there's anything we can do. So, other than that, Sharon Nipp's still recovering, so we want to continue to remember her. But we are in Exodus, the 24th chapter, which is page 57 in your handout. We're beginning with verse 18 tonight. Remember, verses 12 through 18, God calls Moses into the mount. I made the comment last Wednesday night that Moses took Joshua with him. And I want to make sure that you understand that I wasn't saying that Moses decided to take Joshua, because everything we're talking about here, God made the decision. God said who was going to be allowed to come up to the mount and all of that. But Moses did take Joshua with him, which is a correct statement. I just want to make sure everybody knows it was God that is making these decisions and giving these directions. So we're going to begin at verse 18 tonight, but before we do, let's go to our Heavenly Father in prayer. Our most loving Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this day and for the many blessings you've given us, especially the spiritual blessings and the promise of everlasting life if we'll be faithful to Thee. We're thankful, Father, for the privilege we have of being able to come together to study Thy Word without fear of persecution, and to be able to be an encouragement to each other, that we might know the joys of being a Christian as much as possible. We're thankful, Father, for the many talents of this congregation, and we're thankful for our upcoming gospel meeting, and pray that you'd be with Brother Banning as he prepares the lessons, that he might prepare lessons that would be most suited for us as far as our spiritual growth is concerned. And we ask that you'd be with us, that we would make it a very successful gospel meeting, that there would be much fruit as a result of this gospel meeting. We ask, Father, that you'd be with our members who have physical ailments. We have several in the congregation that are not able to be here because of sickness. We have members who, due to age and poor health, are not able to get out, and we ask that you would be with them, and we ask that you would use us as instruments that we might reach out and help them in any way that we can. We also ask, Father, that you would be with our government officials, our politicians in Washington, D.C., that they would begin to work together, that they would solve the problems of this country, that this country would be a better country as a result of the bipartisan efforts. These things we ask in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen. John, are you awake?
Yep.
Okay. Had your eyes closed, I was just wondering.
They're just slow.
Just an update on Stephanie. She is home. She did get to go home yesterday, to her home. And but she did call and say that she may not be here this evening, so looks like she didn't make it, and want to continue to remember her. All right, so what we find here, as I have up here, God calls Moses into the mount, verses 12 through 18, and in verse 18, then let's read verse 18, which is the last verse in the 24th chapter. Hi, Debbie.
Hello.
Donna, let's begin with you if we could. Verse 18 of chapter 24.
Moses entered the midst of the cloud as he went up to the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
All right, so if you were there at that time, you'd recognize that this was an extraordinary presence of mind which the grace of God furnished him with by his 6 days of preparation. Else he does not venture into the cloud, okay? Especially when it broke out in devouring fire. Moses was sure that he who called him would protect him at this point. And even those glorious attributes of God which are most terrible to the wicked, the saints with a humble reverence rejoice in. He that walks righteously and speaks uprightly is able to dwell even with this devouring fire, as we are told. Look at Isaiah, the 33rd chapter, verses 14 and 15. Debbie, you had that?
I can get it.
Okay. And then Karen, if you'll be turning to 1 Corinthians 3, verse 12.
The sinners in Zion are afraid. Fearlessness has seized the hypocrites. Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? He who walks righteously and speaks uprightly, he who despises the gain of oppressions, who gestures with his hands, refusing bribes, who stops his ear from hearing of bloodshed, and shuts his eye from seeing evil.
Okay, now, this obviously was Moses. He was not afraid. He knew that God was going to protect him. And so he was ready and willing to go up into this cloud, this area, to be with God. There are persons and works that will abide in the fire. Look at 1 Corinthians 3:12, Karen.
Now, if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, strong.
And some that will have confidence before God is the idea here. Okay. His continuance in the cloud was no less wonderful, though, because how long was Moses up there?
40 days.
40 days
40 nights.
and 40 nights. It should seem the 6 days were not part of the 40. That's a suggestion from some of the commentaries, because during those 6 days Moses was with Joshua. Remember, Joshua was not allowed to go up into that cloud. So you could add the 6 days onto the 40 days. But during this entire time, Moses was without food. Look at Deuteronomy, the 9th chapter, and verse 9. Kathy?
When I went up into the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant which the Lord made with you, then I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I neither ate bread nor drank water.
Now, if you think about this, it is a known fact that man cannot live without water for that long a period of time. So you have to appreciate that God took care of Moses this whole time. And I can't help but think that I need to be up on that mount for 40 days with no food. I'd like to have water, but no food. Anyway, God could have said what he had to say to Moses in one day. But for the greater vision, if you will, of this whole situation, he kept him with him in the mount 40 days and 40 nights. We are hereby taught to spend much time in communion with God. This is a good lesson that we have here, that Moses spent this much time with him. And we're taught to think that time with God is best spent. Those that would get the knowledge of God's will must meditate their own day and night. And so this is one reason why I enjoy teaching, because it forces me to have to do a lot of studying and preparation, and sometimes I have to go back and correct myself by doing a little bit more studying. But that helps me to meditate, if you will, sometimes day and night. Any comments on chapter 24? All right, let's look at the questions. These questions actually came from Mike Willis, and I thought they were pretty good questions. I tried to put verses with them to help you out, to make it a little easier for you to find the answer. What reaction did Israel give to Moses reading the laws of chapter 20, 22 through chapter 23, 33?
All the words which the Lord has said we will do.
Do what?
All the words which the Lord has said we will do.
Okay. And what did you say, Pat?
They would obey it.
Okay. And those are correct. What I put as a simple answer, when you look at the whole thing, is they answered with one voice. They were all unified together. Question number 2. What was signified by sprinkling both the law and the people with blood in chapter 24, verses 6 through 8?
With the Lord.
Do what?
A covenant with the Lord.
Okay. Covenant with the Lord, made with the people. In what sense, number 3, in what sense was the New Testament sealed with blood?
Christ shed his blood.
Okay. Christ shedding blood, or Jesus' blood, whichever way you want to put it. Number 4, who joined Moses in the eating of the sacrificial meal in chapter 24, verses 9 through 11?
70 of the elders, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu.
Abihu. Okay. Number 5, describe the vision of God which these men witnessed. Verse 17. I may not have put that verse in there for you, but it was verse 17.
They lit a sapphire stone like heaven.
Okay. Number 6, when God called Moses into the mount for further revelation, whom did he take with him? Joshua. All right. Number 7, and the last one, whom did he leave in charge of the multitude?
Aaron and Hur.
Aaron and Hur. Okay. That takes us to the 25th chapter. And remember Exodus 24 through 31, these are all instructions for the tabernacle and the workshop, all right? So in your handout, this is going to be page 58. Okay. God took Moses up to Mount Sinai and revealed to him the divine plan for the tabernacle. What we're going to look at, and these are comments from Mike Willis, if you will, first off. He said, God took Moses up to reveal to him the divine plan, as I have up there, for the tabernacle and other portions of the Mosaical law. This section reveals God's plan for the tabernacle. The tabernacle was the central place of worship from the days of Moses, which took place approximately 1450 BC, to the days of Solomon, which was 970 BC. It was a portable tent which could be moved with the Israelites as they traveled in the wilderness. And I'll show you an artist picture of what they think that the tent looked like in the wilderness. The Lord revealed to Moses the pattern for the tabernacle. Let's read chapter 29, verses 1 through 9. Florence, would you read that for me, please?
25.
Yes, chapter 25, verses 1 through 9.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring me an offering. From everyone who gives it willingly with his heart, you shall take my offering. And this is the offering which you shall take from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen, and goat's hair, ram skins dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light, and spices for the anointing oil and for the sweet incense, onyx stones and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you, that is, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all of its furnishings, just so you shall make it.
All right. A couple of things to take note here is Moses, of course, as we see, is given instructions on how to erect the tabernacle and what materials to use. Who gave him those instructions? God. So it was not left up to the people to decide what color the curtain should be, what kind of wood should be used, what kind of canvas should be used. All of this was at the direction of God. But who was to build it? The people. And that was, of course, maybe a little bit of indication as far as the faith of the people, if they were to do exactly as God told them to do. So Moses erected the tabernacle under divine revelation to reflect then a heavenly origin. Go to verse 40, if you will, and in chapter 25, verse 40, here we find, and see to it that you make them according to the pattern which was shown to you on the mountain. Now, that's not the first time you saw that, because if you go back and you look at verse 9 of 25, according to all that I show you, that is, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. In other words, twice now, God has said, you do it exactly as I have said. Okay? Now, one of the commentaries that I saw said if God showed Moses a picture or model, or showed Moses a picture or model of the tabernacle, and instructed him to make everything exactly according to this pattern, we must assume that in the tabernacle and its furniture, heavenly realities were to be expressed in earthly forms, or, to put it more clearly, the thoughts of God concerning salvation in His kingdom, which the earthly building was to embody and display, were visibly set forth in the pattern shown. The symbolical and typical significance of the whole building necessarily follows from this. And that was actually in the book that these two men wrote. on Exodus in pages 166 and 167. However, if you go to Hebrews, the 8th chapter, and look at Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 5. Shelton, do you have that?
Yes. Verse 5. Who served the copy and shadow of the heavenly things, as Moses was divinely instructed when he was about to make the tabernacle. For he said, "See that you make all things according to the pattern shown you on the mountain."
So the Hebrew writer is stating exactly what we read there in Exodus. Now look at Hebrews 9, 24 and 25. Karen, you have that?
For Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor yet that he should offer himself often, as a high priest entered into the high place every year with blood of others. But then must...
Through 25.
Okay.
Now, what I want to do then in this chapter is I want to explain the literal references regarding the building of the earthly tabernacle, but also I want to try to call our attention to the New Testament realities of which they are the type. Okay? So in verses 1 through 9, which we read, we had the offerings for the sanctuary. Remember in verse 1, he specifically said, "Speak to the children of Israel that they bring me an offering from everyone who gives it," notice that, "willingly." Not that they were going to lose their life if they didn't bring it, or that it was mandatory, but they said give it willingly. This demonstrates the faith of an individual. Okay? So this offering was to be given willingly, but also with their heart, or from the heart. The money to construct the tabernacle then was not raised from taxation of the people. The people donated precious metals, as we saw there in those verses, gold, silver, etc. They donated expensive clothing, they donated skins, they donated oil, spices, and precious stones. The Israelites had resources to make donations from these sources. What had been in the family for years, they brought with them out of Egypt. And they also took a lot of possessions from Egypt. Go back to Exodus, the 12th chapter, and look at verses 35 and 36. Everything okay, John?
No.
No? Go back to Exodus 12 and look at 35 and 36. In 35 and 36 it says, "Now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians." So they took possessions from the Egyptians and brought it with them. They also got possessions from the Amalekites, though. Look at Exodus, the 17th chapter, which again I didn't put that up there, I'm sorry. But in Exodus 17th chapter, and verses beginning at verse 8, it says, "Now Amalek came and fought with Israel and Rephidim, and Moses said to Joshua, 'Choose us some men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand.' So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands on one side, one on one side, and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Write this for a memorial in the book and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven.' And Moses built an altar and called its name, 'The Lord is my banner.' For he said, 'Because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. And so here we have a suggestion, although it doesn't specifically say what they took from Amalek, but because they destroyed that nation, you can pretty well suspect that they took the spoils from Amalek. And so they did have a lot of things that they could give in the building of this tabernacle. It is much the same instruction as is provided for the church regarding our giving today. We find in verses 21 through 29. Ron, you want Exodus, and I don't have it up there either, but Exodus chapter 35, verses 21 through 29.
21 through 29?
Yes, please.
Okay. Then everyone came whose heart was stirred, and everyone whose spirit was willing, and they brought the Lord's offering for the work of the tabernacle of meeting, for all its service, and for the holy garments. They came both men and women, as many as had a willing heart, and brought earrings and nose rings, rings and necklaces, all jewelry of gold, that is, every man who made an offering of gold to the Lord. And every man with whom was found blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen, and goat's hair, red skins of rams and badger skins brought them. Everyone who offered an offering of silver or bronze brought the Lord's offering. And everyone with whom was found acacia wood for any work for the service brought it. All the women who were gifted artisans spun yarn with their hands and brought what they had spun of blue, purple, and scarlet, and fine linen. And all the women whose hearts stirred with wisdom spun yarn of goat's hair. The rulers brought onyx stones, and the stones to be set in the ephod, and the breastplate, and the spices, and oil for the light, for the anointing oil, and for the sweet incense. The children of Israel brought a free will offering to the Lord, all the men and women whose hearts were willing to bring materials for all kinds of work, which the Lord by the hand of Moses had commanded to be done.
So you can see from that reading there that everybody, including even the children of Israel, that the people responded to this appeal in a remarkable way. And this is a good example for us. If you go to, and I did have that up there, I just didn't click far enough. But if you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 7, Donna, and we know that when Paul was talking to the church at Corinth, he was talking about giving, and in fact he said lay by and store on the first day of the week so that there be no gatherings when I come. And look at verse 7 of chapter 9, Donna.
Each one must do just as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver.
And what we'll find in continuing in Exodus, and we'll find this in Leviticus and everything, is that people were given specific instructions, but the idea was give first to the Lord, and the Lord will take care of you. If we hold back from the Lord and we try to take care of ourselves and then begrudgingly give to the Lord, then we will suffer the consequences. And I think in the book of Acts, when you look at Ananias and Sapphira, here was a classic example of two people, husband and wife, who went out and sold their land. And remember, this is the time that shortly after the Pentecost, they were all in Jerusalem there, and they'd been there for a period of time. Some commentaries suggest up to 2 years, from Acts chapter 2 through Acts chapter 5. But the point is that all of the people sold their possessions, and they gave it to the apostles so the apostles could distribute as need. Well, Ananias and Sapphira sold their possessions, which was theirs to begin with, but instead of giving all the money to the apostles, they kept back some of it. But you can almost see in those comments, that story, that they wanted to be recognized like everybody else. So instead of admitting exactly what they gave, they basically said to the apostles, we gave it all. And they got caught in the lie. And they suffered the consequences. But they wanted to be recognized for something they didn't do. And yet it was theirs to, in fact, Peter made that comment, it was yours to begin with. So you didn't have to give it all. You could have given the portion you wanted to give, and that would have been settled. But you gave that portion, but you claimed that you gave more. And this is not what God wants. He wants us to give liberally, and He wants us to give freely. And this is the idea here that we see in the book of Exodus. Any comments through chapter or verse 9? Yes, Donna.
It might be something, but on verse 5, mine says porpoise skins. And all the other ones, they say badger, and then some said goat. What exactly was it? Because it can't be I don't think, how could they get porpoise skins? I'm just wondering. How come, mine's, New American Standard says porpoise. Another one says, some of them say badger, and some of the other versions say goat, and then somebody said, which one is it? I'm just curious.
Well,
Those are very different.
I mean, porpoise and badger. A badger, I can see maybe badger.
I looked that up, and I didn't make a note of it. I should have.
Just wondering, how can they get porpoise out there, a landlocked place? How can they get porpoise?
Maybe they got it when they crossed the Red Sea.
You know,
Yeah,
before I
there you
give you an answer on Donna, let me go back,
Okay.
because I think we're dealing with a Hebrew word here that some translations translated differently than it should have been translated.
And my Greek one,
I think,
does it go back to the Old
yeah, I
Testament
think the
or-
real answer is badger, but let me go back and look at that, unless you want to add something to that, Ron.
Well, yeah, I think what you're saying is the difficulty in translation. It's difficulty we still have today in translating other languages
Right.
and putting it in English or some other translation. Some commentators, translators think the Hebrew word says badger, another dolphin or porpoise. I don't have a problem with either one because they could have got dolphins and porpoises out of the Mediterranean.
Yeah, they could have.
Oh,
But
that's
then
right.
again,
Yeah,
They
because
shipped in
right
a
off
lot of
and they were
things. They
Egypt,
shipped in
yeah,
things
okay.
from Lebanon and other places.
And they just kept the skin. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of made, okay.
of course, they were down here in at Mount Sinai at this time, and so that was right at the tip of the peninsula. So
Okay.
they could have gotten the porpoise, but I'll look it up and get a little
Right.
more
Peter
definitive.
wasn't around at that time.
That's right.
It was okay.
All right.
Thank you.
I will look that up though and see if I can't
It's not a
get.
biggie, but just
some more
wondering,
information on it.
but you say that they could have gotten it from the Mediterranean Sea when they were in Egypt, so
Yeah, I mean,
I can see them, maybe they would.
well, this one doesn't show it very
Yeah,
well, but.
oh.
I mean, this is just an artist rendition of Mount Sinai too. This is not the real Mount Sinai, but Mount Sinai. I'll see a map a little bit later, and you'll see your peninsula goes
Okay.
down like this. Remember, the Red Sea goes up,
Yeah.
and you had the Mediterranean down here at the bottom where they could have gotten that. But I'll look that up a little bit more. Yeah,
Well, it
Rob.
would seem to me that porpoise or dolphin skins would be one of the best protections against the weather.
Yeah.
You're really good.
And I will, when we get to building the tabernacle, I mean, we're just looking at the stuff right now. When we get to building the outer portion of it, we'll address that badger skin a little bit more later. I do remember that. All right, let's go to verses 10 through 16. And Debbie, you want to read that for me? Exodus 25, 10 through 16.
And they shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits shall it be its length, 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. And you shall overlay it with pure gold. Inside and out you shall overlay it, and shall make on it a molding of gold all around. You shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in its 4 corners. 2 rings shall be on one side, and 2 rings on the other side. And you shall make poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. You shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark, that the ark may be carried by them. The poles shall be in the rings of the ark. They shall not be taken from it. And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I will give you.
Okay. Has God ever given specific dimensions before?
Yes.
Where?
New York.
Building the ark, huh?
The other ark.
Yeah. So when God says it, that settles it. if they'd have built this Ark of the Covenant out of anything but acacia wood, if they'd have changed the dimensions in any way, God would not have been happy, would he? In fact, later on we'll talk about Nadab and Abihu and the fire that they used, and God struck them dead. And the scriptures never tell us what kind of fire they used. It just wasn't the fire that God authorized. And so we don't always need all the information. We just need to know that God said it, and that settles it. And here in this case, he said, "And thou shalt cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in the 4 corners thereof." In verse 12. The only object in the part of the tabernacle proper called the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant. It is also called Ark of the Lord, Ark of God, Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. And let's see here. Yeah, Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 8. I do have it up there. Karen, you had that?
Almost. At that time the Lord separated the tribe of Levi to bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, to stand before the Lord, to minister to him, and to bless in his name to this day.
Okay. Now that was where I got Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, but it was also called Ark of Testimony. The Ark of the Covenant then was constructed of shittim or acacia wood. Its dimensions were 2.5 cubits long by 1.5 cubits wide and 1.5 cubits deep. Anybody have an idea how big a cubic is?
18 inches.
How big?
18 inches.
Yeah, about 18 inches. And so that gives you an idea of the size of the Ark of the Covenant, okay? It was overlaid with pure gold. A crown of gold was placed on its top edge. The ark had 4 rings of gold attached to it, through which stays were placed that it may be carried from place to place. The testimony, which was the 10 Commandments engraved on stone, was placed in the Ark of the Covenant. Look at verse 16 again of chapter 25, where it says, "And you shall put in the ark the testimony, which was the 10 Commandments." Okay? Now, the Ark of the Covenant served as the repository for the 2 tablets of the law. We can look at 16, but also if you look at verse 21, where it says, "You shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I will give you." We could also find this, we'll not go to it and look at it, but in chapter 40, verse 20, we would see the same thing. Okay? But let's look at Deuteronomy, the 10th chapter, and verses 1 through 5. Kathy, I'll give you a moment to turn to that. And Florence, if you'll turn to Hebrews, the 9th chapter, and verses 4 and 5. And we'll read that in a minute.
At that time the Lord said to me, "Hew for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and come up to me on the mountain, and make yourself an ark of wood. And I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke, and you shall put them in the ark." So I made an ark of acacia wood, hewed 2 tablets of stone like the first, and went up the mountain, having the 2 tablets in my hand. And he wrote on the tablets, according to the first writing, the 10 Commandments, which the Lord had spoken to you in the mountain from the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly, and the Lord gave them to me. Then I turned and came down from the mountain and put the tablets in the ark, which I had made, and there they are, just as the Lord commanded me.
Okay. Now, on kind of a humorous side note, and we'll look at it a little bit more, why did Moses break the first tablets?
He was mad and upset with
People
them.
disobeyed.
Why was he mad?
The people
was
were
bad.
running riot, worshiping it.
But I have a feeling there's a
They
joke in here
made the
somewhere.
golden calf. They made the golden calf.
Yeah, Aaron and his sister, who was supposed to be in charge and supposed to be faithful. And remember, Aaron was the first what?
Priest.
Not just priest, high priest
Oh.
in the tabernacle. Okay? And we'll see that, but here was an individual who was supposed to be a man of God, decided to yield to the people because the people wanted a idol,
They were complaining again. Yes.
Yeah, they were complaining again. So Moses comes down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of stone, and he sees what's taking place. And yeah, he was probably angry, but he was very disappointed as well. And so in his disappointment and his anger, he destroyed the 2 tablets. So Moses eventually walks back up that Mount Sinai, and he spends another 40 days and 40 nights up there to get those tablets again. And as he's coming down, you can just picture by now that Moses is getting pretty tired with all that traveling up and down and everything. And so the humor side of it, God speaks out to him and says, "What? Would you prefer me put it on a PDF file?"
Well, he was probably hungry.
Okay,
He
that's
probably
just,
really wishes he wouldn't have broke them.
yeah,
That's what I
that's
was thinking, Shelton. As soon as he threw him down, he was like, "What did I just do?"
just the humor side of the
Here
note.
we
But
go.
let's look at the Hebrew writer and see what else was put in this ark. Hebrews 9, 4 and 5, Florence.
Which of the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid on all sides with gold, in which were the golden pot that had the manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tablets of the covenant, and above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail.
Okay. So we have a pot of manna. What was significant about the pot of manna?
That's what they were fed with, bread from heaven.
God took care of them in the wilderness and fed them with manna, didn't he? And then we have Aaron's rod. These both were added to the collection, if you will, in the ark. So when David moved the Ark of the Covenant in a manner that was not according to the Lord's pattern, in 2 Samuel chapter 6 and verses 3 and following, Shelton, you have that?
Yeah, how far do you want me to go past verse 3?
Well,
To the end of the chapter? Or?
I should have looked it up and told you exactly what I want. Let me look at it and I'll tell you here.
Okay.
Yeah, just read down through verse 11.
Okay. So they set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart, and they brought it out of the house of Abinadab. I hope that's the last time it's in there. Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. Then David and all the house of Israel played music before the Lord on all kinds of instruments of fir wood, on harps, on stringed instruments, on tambourines, on sistrums, and on cymbals. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God. And David became angry because of the Lord's outbreak against Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" So David would not move the ark of the Lord with him into the city of David, but David took it aside into the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household.
Okay. So, why was Uzzah struck dead?
Touch the ark.
What was wrong with that?
He disobeyed.
Wasn't supposed to.
Didn't touch
He
it.
wasn't of the right tribe.
Well, how do we know he wasn't? Well, okay, he wasn't of the right tribe, but how do we know he wasn't supposed to touch the ark?
Because he was told.
Somewhere in this book,
They
God
were
told her
told
not
not to touch it.
Well, right
to.
here,
I wish I could.
just reading the
be more
verses we
accurate.
read, we have poles to carry.
Right.
It was only to be carried by the poles.
Exactly right. God gave them specific instructions to make these 2 poles, to have the 4 rings, and the poles was to be put in those rings to carry the ark from place to place. It wasn't delivered or carried in that manner. And when the ox began to stumble and Uzzah reached out and touched the ark, He was struck dead because of his disobedience. Some people might say, well, why wasn't David struck? Because David moved the ark in a manner that was not supposed to be done. And I'll answer that later.
It always just struck me because that story strikes me because I think of people that try to think they're doing something good, but they're not doing what God asked them to do. And he was actually trying to save some. I mean, he was actually in his heart thinking, I'm going to do something good. And it was probably just an automatic reaction to keep it from touching the ground. But he was doing something to begin with that wasn't right. So that story always strikes me when I think about people that think they have, I'm going to do something good.
Well, isn't that kind of the case of what we've seen today? People think they're doing something good when in reality they're doing exactly the opposite of what God told them to do.
Yes.
That's why we're told not to lean on our own understanding.
Yeah. So people will suffer the consequences as a result of that, just because of their disobedience, just as Uzzah did, and other Israelites, other people at that time. So, well, that was our second bell. So we'll finish chapter 12 next, or chapter 25 next week.